The story opens with Orhan cautiously moving through a deserted tunnel. Staying on high alert, he's suddenly ambushed by several demon rats charging straight at him. With precise sword swings, he cuts them down and realizes he hasn't lost his edge after all. That small victory sparks hope in him, making him believe he might still be able to walk the path of a true swordsman. Moments later, a pack of goblins blocks his way. This time, Orhan decides to rely on more than just his blade and puts his support magic to the test. He casts a spell on himself, instantly boosting his physical strength as a dark green aura surrounds his body. With his power amplified, Orhan dispatches the goblins with ease. He explains that support spells are essential for surviving difficult battles, but they come with a major drawback. They don't last forever. Their duration depends entirely on the user's magic resistance. For Orhan, the effects fade after roughly 3 minutes, forcing him to constantly track time during combat. If the spell expires at the wrong moment, it could mean instant defeat. Timing his magic perfectly, Orhan refreshes the spell and calmly eliminates the remaining goblins. Despite his solid performance, the party leader, Oliver, suddenly announces that Orhan is being removed from the group. Completely shocked, Orhan assumes it must be a cruel joke, especially since he and Oliver have been close since childhood. Oliver admits their long friendship and explains that because of it, he gave Orhan countless chances to improve. Unfortunately, he believes Orhan can no longer keep up with the rest of the team. The other members, Annalie and Derek, step in and tell Oliver to stop sugarcoating the truth. They bluntly state that Orhan is being kicked out simply because he's too weak. Orhan is left speechless. This party was founded by him and Oliver 8 years ago and rose to fame at an incredible pace, becoming the first group to reach the 94th floor of the Southern Great Dungeon. Their achievements earned them the title of the Heroes Party. Oliver admits that Orhan's support magic isn't useless, but after witnessing the power of enchanters from rival parties during their last raid, the gap became impossible to ignore. Orhan argues that he was originally a swordsman and was never meant to specialize in support magic. Dennis suddenly lashes out, accusing Orhan of switching roles only because Oliver surpassed him with the sword. Orhan denies this, explaining that the party desperately needed an enchanter, and he was the most suited for the role. He even created original magic to compensate for his weaknesses, which he believes is the very reason the group survived the deepest dungeon levels. However, Oliver shuts down the argument, revealing that the decision is final. They've already found someone to replace him. Orhan freezes in disbelief as those words sink in, his eyes widening as he asks if this is truly how they intend to cast him aside after everything they've been through together. Holding on to the last shred of dignity he has, Orhan turns around and walks away without another word. As he leaves, Annalie calls after him, labeling him a jack of all trades, someone who can do many things but never excels at any single one. Those words linger in Orhan's mind as he makes his way back through the tunnel. Even so, he refuses to accept them. Deciding he's had enough for one day, Orhan heads toward the exit. Suddenly, a group of adventurers bursts out of the dungeon, panicked and gasping for air. He tries to ignore them and continue on his way, but their conversation stops him in his tracks. They admit they were attacked by a massive group of orcs and were forced to abandon a new female member who had only joined their party that morning. Orhan knows he shouldn't interfere, yet he can't bring himself to walk away. His fist tightens as memories of being left behind resurface. When the adventurers attempt to defend their decision, Orhan snaps, telling them that people like them disgust him. Their leader angrily claims that staying would have changed nothing, and, enraged by Orhan's criticism, throws a punch. Orhan effortlessly blocks it and slams the man to the ground in a single counterattack before demanding to know where they left the girl. Deep inside the dungeon, the girl is cornered as orcs close in around her. She desperately maintains a barrier to keep them at bay, but repeated blows eventually shatter it. With nowhere left to escape, she closes her eyes, resigned to her fate. Suddenly, a fierce blast of wind tears through the chamber, and Orhan appears in front of her. Activating his support magic, he charges into battle, cutting down several orcs in rapid succession. The girl watches in stunned silence as Orhan fights, seamlessly blending swordplay with enchantments. She can't tell whether he's a swordsman or a support mage, or somehow both. Orhan continues his assault, and although he understands why a low-ranked party would flee from such numbers, he remains unfazed. Empowering his blade, he eliminates the remaining orcs in one decisive strike. Once the danger has passed, Orhan checks on the girl, asking if she's unharmed. The shock finally catches up to her, and she collapses in tears, overwhelmed after narrowly escaping death. A short while later, they exit the dungeon through a side passage. Outside, Orhan says his farewells and starts to leave, but she quickly stops him, insisting on properly thanking him. She introduces herself as Sophia and offers to buy him dinner as gratitude for saving her life. Orhan initially declines, explaining that he didn't help her for recognition. However, her pleading expression makes it impossible for him to refuse, and he eventually agrees. Before they depart, Orhan notices a crest on her cloak that feels strangely familiar, though he can't recall where he's seen it before. Later that evening, they arrive at a local restaurant, which Sophia happily reveals is her favorite place. As Orhan scans the place, one of the signs catches his eye, and the symbol on it suddenly jogs his memory. He realizes he's seen that crest before. It's the same emblem stitched onto Sophia's cloak. Putting the pieces together, Orhan figures out that Sophia belongs to the Night Sky Silver Rabbits, one of the largest and most influential guilds in the Kingdom of Noaden. Once inside, Sophia unexpectedly runs into her older sister, Selma. When Sophia asks why she's there, Selma casually explains that she had business nearby and stopped in to eat. Noticing Orhan, Selma immediately teases Sophia, saying it's way too early for her to already have a boyfriend. To Sophia's surprise, Orhan and Selma clearly recognize each other, hinting at a shared past. Selma is soon revealed to be a major figure, an S-rank adventurer from the strongest unit within the Silver Rabbits and the most powerful enchanter on the entire continent. She's the one who revolutionized party formations by introducing specialized roles: attackers to deal damage, defenders to protect the group, and supporters to enhance allies from the rear. This system completely changed how adventurers approach dungeon raids. Inspired by Selma's ideas, Orhan had chosen to become an enchanter for his former party. Ironically, it was after witnessing Selma's overwhelming enchantment abilities during a raid the previous month that Oliver and the others decided Orhan no longer measured up. Orhan is confused when Selma suddenly glares at him and accuses him of getting too close to her 14-year-old sister. He hurriedly explains that all he intended was to share a meal with Sophia and that his motives were innocent. Selma somehow takes offense anyway, assuming he's implying her sister isn't good enough for him. Before things escalate further, Sophia steps in and tells Selma to stop yelling at the man who saved her life. Selma pauses, then slowly realizes what that statement means. Sophia had entered the dungeon alone. Sophia apologizes, admitting she knows it was reckless. Orhan now understands that Sophia had been exploring without her guild support the entire time. Seeing that her sister is unharmed, Selma decides not to scold her any further. She sincerely thanks Orhan for protecting Sophia and apologizes for her earlier behavior. The three of them sit down to eat and talk things through. Still curious, Sophia asks how Orhan and Selma know each other. Orhan explains that they met during the raid last month, where both served as enchanters in the same unit. Since Selma outranked him, she took command while Orhan supported her from behind. Selma is surprised Sophia doesn't recognize Orhan's name, reminding her that he was part of the famous Heroes Party. Sophia is stunned by the revelation and immediately becomes far more polite toward him. Orhan quickly clears things up, explaining that he's no longer affiliated with the Heroes Party, as they've gone their separate ways. Selma is visibly shocked that such a renowned group would abandon someone of his skill. She then asks if that means he's currently unattached. Assuming she's about to invite him to join the Silver Rabbits, Orhan cuts her off and firmly declines, saying he has no intention of joining any party for the time being. Selma quickly clarifies that Orhan has misunderstood her intentions. She isn't trying to recruit him into the guild. Instead, she wants him to serve as a tutor for a special training expedition scheduled for the following day. His job would be to help mentor a group of rookie adventurers. The plan involves A-rank fighters and above leading the recruits as they descend 50 floors into the Southern Great Dungeon over the course of 3 days. Orhan is stunned by the proposal. Even elite adventurers normally take 6 months to a full year to reach that depth. Selma admits the challenge will be extreme, but insists it's achievable if they take the most direct route. She also mentions that the guild's sponsors are strongly backing the operation. That detail immediately raises Orhan's suspicions. If the mission were truly reckless, the guild could have rejected the sponsors outright. Realizing this, Orhan pieces together the real objective. If inexperienced recruits are allowed to reach deeper floors without personally defeating the floor bosses, the entire guild's overall strength would skyrocket. Selma is impressed that Orhan figured this out so quickly with minimal information, recognizing that he's far more perceptive than she originally thought. In the dungeon, a powerful boss appears every 10 floors, and defeating it is normally required to progress further. These encounters often result in severe injuries or even deaths among new adventurers. Selma gently takes his hands and tells him she genuinely respects him, which is why she's asking him personally. Hearing this brings back the painful memory of being cast out of the heroes' party because his support magic couldn't match Selma's. Orhan realizes that returning to the role of enchanter would only leave him filled with regret. Pulling his hands away, he declines the offer, explaining that he already has other plans. That's when Sophia steps in once again, pleading with him using her irresistible puppy dog eyes. Unable to hold out any longer, Orhan finally agrees, but on one condition. He makes it clear that he has chosen to walk the path of a swordsman. If he joins the expedition, it will be as a frontline fighter, not a support mage. Selma is surprised but ultimately accepts it, believing he can always fall back on enchantments if things go wrong. She tells him to report to Silver Rabbit headquarters the next morning if he's truly coming. Later that night, Orhan stops by his favorite shop. The owner is about to close, yet still welcomes him inside for a drink. Sitting together, the old man thanks Orhan for bringing attention to the store during his time as a famous adventurer, crediting him for the recent boom in business. Feeling awkward, Orhan admits that he's no longer part of the heroes' party. Even so, the owner expresses his gratitude, leaving Orhan surprised that he's still being appreciated after being abandoned by his team. The old man smiles and says he has a feeling Orhan will receive many more words of thanks in the future. He adds that leaving the heroes' party might turn out to be a hidden blessing, one Orhan simply hasn't recognized yet. Encouraging him to follow his heart, the owner promises to support him no matter what path he chooses. Moved by the kindness, Orhan's eyes well up with tears as he sincerely thanks the old man. And that concludes episode 1. Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next part, and check out the next video to continue the story. The following day, Orhan and Selma meet with the leader of the Night Sky Silver Rabbits, a man known as Vince Briars. Vince has already heard countless rumors about Orhan's skills, so he believes bringing him in would be a huge advantage for the clan. Orhan greets him politely, saying it's an honor to meet the head of such a famous guild. Still, before committing, Orhan asks to hear the full details of the teaching expedition first. Vince agrees and asks Selma to explain the plan. As the three sit down, Selma calmly begins outlining everything. While she talks, the story briefly shifts to the past. Right after learning that Orhan had been dismissed from the hero party, Selma rushed to inform Vince. Upon hearing this, Vince immediately concluded that the hero party would lose much of its strength without Orhan. Selma shared the same opinion, explaining that Orhan's support magic was the true reason the party reached heights they never should have. Although his buffs themselves are weaker than normal, his casting speed is unbelievably fast, at least 4 times quicker than hers. More importantly, his sharp judgment and ability to provide exactly the right support at the perfect moment are what make him an exceptional enchanter. The scene then returns to the present. Orhan now understands the overall plan. 10 rookie teams will enter the dungeon, accompanied by 5 escort members, including himself and Selma. The rookie groups will rotate turns fighting monsters, while the escorts remain on standby. If anything goes wrong, the escorts will immediately step in. However, Orhan raises a concern. pointing out that only 5 escorts seems risky, and that having more would lower the chances of serious injuries. Selma responds by saying the mission's goal is to push the rookies to level 51. With too many escorts, the dungeon would become too safe, and the rookies wouldn't improve properly. Keeping escort numbers low is meant to create pressure and accelerate their growth. Even so, Orhan senses that this explanation isn't entirely truthful. Given how important the mission is, he suspects there's another reason behind the decision. Still, he chooses not to question it further and agrees to participate. With that settled, Vince explains the reward. Orhan will receive 2 gold coins up front and an additional 10 upon successful completion. Satisfied with the payment, Orhan accepts without hesitation and promises to give everything he has. The next day, Orhan arrives at the dungeon entrance, where all the students have already gathered. He soon meets Selma and Sophia. Noticing that Sophia's outfit stands out from the others, Orhan casually compliments her. She instantly blushes, clearly embarrassed yet pleased, leaving Selma completely stunned by the reaction. Moments later, Selma looks around and notices that many of the students appear anxious, exhausted, and discouraged. She quietly asks Orhan if he can help lift their spirits before the mission starts. Sophia returns to her own team, while Selma introduces Orhan to the rest of the escort members. These include Anthem and Bernard, both defenders, and Kathy, the team's healer. Orhan quickly studies them and realizes that, together, they form a solid and well-rounded support group. Even so, Orhan can't stop thinking about what would have happened if he had refused the job. He wonders whether someone else would have been forced to take on 2 roles at once or be pushed into a position they weren't prepared for. An uneasy sensation settles in his chest, and his instincts warn him that something about this mission isn't right. No matter how much he reflects on it, though, he can't pinpoint the exact problem. Soon after, Selma steps forward to speak to the students. One glance at their faces tells her how anxious they are, so she decides to ease their nerves by revealing that Orhan will be escorting them. She introduces him as a former member of the hero party who has reached as deep as the 94th floor of the dungeon. The reaction is immediate. Shock, excitement, and relief ripple through the group. Their fear quickly fades, replaced by confidence, as many of them begin to believe that with someone like Orhan present, the dungeon won't be so frightening after all. Once the crowd settles, Orhan quietly asks Selma if it was really necessary to build him up like that. Selma firmly replies that it was. She explains that an escort's role isn't just protection, but also keeping the students calm, focused, and mentally prepared. After thinking it over, Orhan admits she has a point and drops the subject. Orhan is then assigned to escort Team 10, which happens to include Sophia. As he approaches them, he quickly notices something unusual. The party only has 3 members, even though dungeon teams normally consist of 4. At first, he assumes someone is running late, but they soon clarify that they are a 3-person team. This immediately puts Orhan on edge. From his experience, fewer members often means a much higher level of danger. The group's leader, Logan, then steps forward with confidence and introduces himself. He boldly claims to be a talented enchanter and even boasts that he'll someday surpass Selma. Orhan immediately senses that Logan is extremely self-assured, perhaps too much so. While he doubts the young man's attitude, he quietly hopes his abilities can live up to his words. Next, Caroline introduces herself as the party's defender. Orhan quickly notices she isn't wearing any armor and asks if she plans to equip some later. Caroline responds casually, saying she's heard that question many times before. She explains that her combat style relies on speed and evasion, not blocking, and that armor would only slow her down. Finally, Sophia introduces herself properly, offering a polite and respectful greeting. Her demeanor helps Orhan relax slightly, as she seems far more grounded than the others. Before long, the group enters the dungeon. Once inside, Orhan feels a sense of calm wash over him as the noisy chatter fades and the dungeon's silence takes over. As they move forward, Caroline begins bombarding him with questions, mostly about his time in the hero party and the reason he left. With no intention of revealing the truth, that he was expelled, Orhan coldly tells her it's none of her concern. As they proceed deeper, 2 demon wolves suddenly emerge from behind and rush toward the group with killing intent. Orhan notices them instantly, but doesn't even move. the trap spells he placed earlier activate, snaring the wolves and killing them on the spot. These traps are nearly impossible to detect before they trigger, making them an efficient way to deal with rear attacks without interrupting the party's momentum. With limited time, Orhan has no intention of wasting energy on pointless battles. The group continues forward and eventually reaches the 20th floor. Throughout the journey, Orhan closely watches how the team fights and cooperates. At first, he assumed Logan was nothing more than a loud, overconfident rookie. However, after seeing him in action, Orhan admits that Logan genuinely has talent as an enchanter. If he continues improving at this rate, Orhan believes Logan could one day stand his ground in an A-rank party. That said, Logan still has one major weakness: his leadership in combat. His instructions come out too slowly and are sometimes unclear, which could easily put the team in danger. Even so, Orhan is confident this flaw will naturally fade as Logan gains more battlefield experience. Caroline, on the other hand, is incredibly fast, making her well-suited for her dodge-focused defensive role. However, she has two serious issues. First, she rushes into combat without properly assessing the situation, charging at enemies the moment they appear. Second, her weapon choice limits her effectiveness. While her twin daggers match her speed, they lack the raw power needed for tougher encounters. Sophia doesn't immediately stand out, but after several fights, Orhan realizes she's far above the average beginner. She tends to hold back and fight cautiously, but he believes this restraint will disappear as she grows more comfortable with her teammates. More importantly, she doesn't show any glaring rookie mistakes, which makes Orhan genuinely curious about how much she'll improve in the future. Before long, the escort teams ahead of them defeat the boss on the 20th floor. With the area cleared, preparations begin to move on to floor 21. Selma then announces that once the students register floor 20 on their guild cards, training for the day will be complete. Following her instructions, the students decide to end the session. The next morning, Orhan wakes up and notices a newspaper nearby. As he reads through it, he sees an article revealing that the hero's party has already replaced their enchanter. This confirms that news of his removal has become public. A wave of irritation and disappointment hits him. He wishes they had waited until the teaching expedition was over, worrying that the students' perception of him might change. Still, he knows there's nothing he can do about it, so he puts the thought aside and heads toward the dungeon for the day's training. On the way, Orhan is suddenly stopped by a familiar face. Luna, one of his former teammates, approaches him and desperately asks him to return to the hero party. The request doesn't surprise him. He knows Luna has always respected him. Calmly, Orhan tells her that he has no intention of going back. Luna gently takes his hands and reminds him of the promise they once made to conquer the dungeon together. At that moment, something inside Orhan finally breaks. He pulls his hands away and turns his back on her. As he walks off, he reminds himself that the dream of clearing the dungeon together belonged to Luna, Oliver, and himself. When they were younger, he truly believed the three of them would stay together forever. But now, with everything changed, Orhan accepts the painful truth that some dreams are better left in the past. That concludes episode 2. Subscribe so you don't miss the next part, and be sure to check out the next video. On the way, Orhan reflects on the moment he was expelled from the hero's party. The newspaper had openly reported it that morning, which meant the new recruits were likely confused about how to see him now, especially since Selma had praised him so highly for being a former member of the hero's party. When Orhan reaches the dungeon entrance, he notices all the rookies gathered there, yet the atmosphere feels completely different. It's obvious everyone has already read the news. The newcomers whisper among themselves, discussing how Orhan is no longer part of the hero's party. Logan, in particular, thinks things would have felt different if Orhan had chosen to leave on his own. However, the article clearly stated that he was expelled for being too weak, which changes everything. Orhan tries to greet the rookies, but their responses are mixed and awkward. He quickly realizes he's no longer as welcome as he was just the day before, all because of a sensational headline. At that moment, Selma arrives with Ant, Byrne, and Kathy. She immediately apologizes, admitting that she may have caused confusion by emphasizing Orhan's past with the hero's party to reassure the rookies. Orhan reassures her that none of this is her fault and encourages her to hold her head high, lead the group into the dungeon, and let him handle support duties. Ant, Byrne, and Kathy add that whatever happened between Orhan and the hero's party doesn't change the fact that he's one of the very few people alive who reached the 94th floor and survived. Hearing this eases some of the pressure on Orhan. He then rejoins his team, where Sophia and Carol warmly greet him good morning. Logan, however, seems uncertain and unsure of how he should treat Orhan now. To clear the tension, Orhan brings up the newspaper himself and asks if they read it. Sophia and Carol admit they did, but dismiss it as nonsense filled with lies. Logan, on the other hand, questions Orhan directly, asking if the report was true. Orhan answers honestly, saying that technically it was. He was removed from the hero's party because he was considered too weak. He apologizes to his team for not being upfront earlier and admits he isn't the heroic figure everyone expects him to be. Sophia finally snaps and tells him he's wrong. She insists he's incredibly strong, reminding everyone how she witnessed him single-handedly defeat a massive group of orcs without breaking a sweat. Grateful for her faith, Orhan thanks her and assures the group that even though he's no longer part of the hero's party, he's still more than capable of helping them safely reach the 51st floor. He asks them to trust him. The girls seem reassured, but Logan still looks disappointed, feeling as though he's been misled. Soon after, they enter the dungeon. For the day, the recruits are expected to advance from the 21st floor to the 35th. Orhan is instructed not to interfere, only observing unless things get out of control. The expedition goes smoothly at first. Carol handles the monsters on the 24th floor with her twin daggers and aggressive close combat style, while Sophia takes care of larger enemies on the 30th floor, impressing even Orhan, who wonders if he underestimated her abilities. When they reach the 31st floor, the middle levels, the situation changes. This area is unfamiliar territory, meaning the rookies now need proper guidance. Orhan steps forward and takes charge, moving ahead to scout the area. Suddenly, he senses a group of goblins nearby and alerts his party to prepare for battle. He quickly orders Carol to handle the goblins while instructing Sophia to take down the orc using her long-range magic. Both respond instantly. Carol rushes forward to engage the goblins. Orhan turns to Logan and instructs him to activate his support magic. Before Orhan can even finish speaking, Logan has already formed multiple magic circles, rapidly casting agility buffs on Carol to give her the upper hand against the goblins. Despite following the orders, Logan still isn't convinced that someone like Orhan deserves to guide him, especially since the advice seems so obvious that anyone could have given it. The situation suddenly takes a dangerous turn when the orc triggers Sophia's past trauma. She freezes in panic, unable to prepare an attack. This becomes a critical moment, as Logan is fully occupied maintaining his spells on Carol. Watching helplessly, he glances at Orhan, questioning what kind of guide he really is and why he isn't stepping in to help Sophia. At that moment, Orhan calmly forms a magical seal that drastically slows the orc's movements. He then approaches Sophia and speaks to her steadily, telling her to breathe, focus, and trust herself. He reminds her that she's far stronger than the orc and has nothing to fear. Taking a deep breath, Sophia regains her composure and conjures an enormous fireball, completely obliterating the orc in a single blast. The sheer power of the spell shocks everyone, Orhan included, who had no idea she could wield such high-level magic. Carol immediately rushes over and embraces Sophia, while Orhan praises her for the perfect strike. Not long after, the group reaches the 35th floor, where they come face to face with a death tarantula. Logan panics instantly, convinced they're doomed since there's no way to handle a monster like that. In contrast, Sophia and Carol remain calm, placing their full trust in Orhan and waiting for his instructions. Orhan orders Logan to cast agility and strength enhancements on Carol, while boosting Sophia's magic power. Logan doubts the plan, thinking Orhan has lost his mind by repeating the same strategy as before. Still, he follows through and casts the spells. Orhan then tells Carol to engage the monster directly and keep its attention focused on her. She nods without hesitation and charges toward the tarantula. Logan tries to stop her, but Orhan intervenes, explaining that stepping in now would put everyone at a disadvantage. They need to observe and wait. He then instructs Sophia to leap onto the creature and slice down its back. Understanding instantly, Sophia jumps onto the tarantula's head and drags her blade from front to back. Orhan tells her to keep drawing its focus while carefully dodging every strike, warning her that the creature's venom is lethal. The tarantula lashes out at Carol with its sharp legs, but she skillfully evades the attacks, even deflecting a few of them. Impressed, Orhan tells Logan to maintain his buffs on Carol, stressing that her survival depends on it. He then turns to Sophia and orders her to restrain the monster. Without hesitation, Sophia uses her arrow cutter technique to sever the creature's legs, forcing it to collapse. Carol begins to celebrate, but Orhan immediately warns her that the fight isn't over yet. Unfortunately, the warning comes too late. The monster, still alive, fires its webbing and ensnares Carol, dragging her toward its body. Orhan quickly commands Logan to boost Carol's strength and speed again. Logan complies without protest, but Carol panics and struggles helplessly, crying out to Orhan for help. Orhan instantly tells Sophia to prepare her rock arrow and casts a sharpness-enhancing spell on Carol's blades. Empowered by the spell, Carol finally gains the strength she needs and breaks free from the spider's grip. Sophia follows up immediately with her rock arrow spell, completely obliterating the monster in a single blast. With that decisive strike, the day's expedition finally comes to an end. Orhan praises Logan for his excellent use of support magic, pointing out that without those buffs, the team would never have survived the battles they faced. By the time they exit the dungeon, the sun is already beginning to set. Selma congratulates the rookies, telling them they've all performed exceptionally well so far. She reminds them that the final stage of their journey awaits them tomorrow, and urges everyone to rest properly and eat well. After that, the group splits up and heads their separate ways. Orhan is stopped by Ant and Byrne, who invite him out for lunch. After a moment of hesitation, he accepts, realizing it's not every day someone offers to treat him. As they head back toward the city, Logan asks Sophia about the moment Orhan first saved her life, curious about the exact spells he used. Sophia thinks back and recalls that Orhan unleashed a wind blast before enhancing his sword with magic, slicing through the orcs effortlessly. Hearing this, Logan begins to connect the dots. Earlier that day, he had seen Orhan casually cast a spell that drastically reduced the orcs' movement speed, something known as a debuff. These spells are notoriously difficult to use, and even elite mages like Selma struggle to cast more than one in days, often requiring extensive preparation. Yet Orhan used one instantly, without effort. Logan realizes that Orhan didn't just act like a skilled mage, he functioned like a master strategist. He knew exactly when buffs would expire, timed each enhancement perfectly, and even cast spells in advance to predict enemy movements. In that moment, Logan understands he had completely misjudged Orhan. He isn't an average mage at all. He's a true genius. Back in the city, Orhan stops at a tavern with Byrne and Ant. They tell him to order whatever he wants since the meal is on them. Curious, they ask about his true role, noting that he used to be an enchanter in the heroes' party, but now fights as a swordsman. Orhan explains that he's always been a swordsman at heart, ever since witnessing his grandfather slay a massive beast that once threatened their village. From that day on, he swore to follow the path of the blade. That dream became reality when he joined the heroes' party as a swordsman. However, as they descended to deeper floors, the monsters grew stronger and their progress slowed. Around that time, Selma introduced a strategy where the entire team relied heavily on an enchanter to make combat decisions. Since no one else in the party and Hardy had the aptitude for that role, Orhan was forced to take it on. For the sake of the team, he gave up his position as a frontline swordsman and became their enchanter instead. Thinking back, Orhan bitterly believes the heroes' party now has little chance of clearing the upcoming floors, but he decides it's no longer his concern. He tells Byrne and Ant that his goal now is to become a perfectly balanced swordsman, strong enough to conquer even the lower floors on his own without relying on anyone else. What he doesn't know is that the very next day, the heroes' party will come looking for him in the same dungeon he plans to conquer. And that's where this story ends. Remember to like and subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.